Well, hello again, and I'm back here with my friend Jeff Cranford, and we are moving on in our series of studies called Spiritual Due Diligence, and we are in our second study, The Nature of Man, and we are to the third lesson, which is the continuing result of sin. And we alluded to this a little bit the last time we were talking about Adam and Eve's sin. Does it continue to have effect for us today? And I think we can posit that. We can theorize, yeah, it has effect. But until we kind of personalize and say,
Right.
wow, I'm affected by the choices I make, maybe it doesn't hit home. So today I have a question for you, because in our society we certainly have come to a point where people say, well, you can believe what you want to believe, and I'll believe what you want to believe, I want to believe, and you believe it. And if sin is sin for you, it may not be sin for me. It may be pleasure for me. So how do we draw a line there? Can we discern that something absolutely is sin for everyone? What do we do with this?
Well, first of all, I think sin, it's clear that most people agree that sin, they may not call it sin, bad choices have consequences.
Sure.
I think as we look across the scope of all religions, there's some kind of common denominator, the golden rule that kind of seems to run through. Many cultures would agree that murder is wrong. Again, not all cultures through history have agreed that murder is wrong. Most cultures would agree that going and sleeping with another man's wife is wrong. Most cultures would agree that stealing someone else's goods is not wrong. Not all cultures agree. There's not total agreement cross-culturally, but there is a sense that we need something that holds our culture together. And you know, as I look at this, and I think about the effect and the impact and said, well, we have a propensity, I think, as human beings, and again, we saw in the last study, Jeremiah is saying the heart is deceitfully wicked. Who can know it? We want there to be constraints within culture. I had a friend of mine from Europe who used to say, I love rules for everybody else, but not for myself.
Yeah.
And there is a sense that we like others, the constraint that law brings, or that any kind of law brings, whether it's religious law or whether it's just cultural law. We like the constraint because we don't want chaos. But we also want to have the freedom to make the decisions that we want to make, and we want it consequence-free, right? We want sin light. We want to drink it. We want it to taste good, and it's certainly pleasurable for a season. But we don't want it to have consequences, and I think Paul really hit it on the head. And in his letter to the Galatians, they were struggling with this. He says, do not be deceived. God is not mocked. For whatever a man sows, this he will also reap. In other words, look, whatever you're planting today is going to bear a harvest. Now, we think of this sometimes only in the negative. We think of, okay, I'm planting seeds. I know nobody can find out about this, and I'm going to hide this. And yet, sometimes we recognize that the effects, though they may not be immediate, maybe my spouse doesn't find out. But the fact is, I now look at my spouse differently. I feel differently when I get up in the morning. I feel a sense of guilt. Well, that's just religion that makes me feel guilty. If I can do away with religion, I won't feel the guilt. But the fact of the matter is, we feel those. The impacts, the residual impact of sin is so far-reaching that we can't know it. We just look for the immediate impact. Maybe there's divorce in the family. Well, our kids, they seem to be okay. They're not really struggling with this. And yet 20 years down the road, we have maybe a child come to us. And I'm not putting, divorce is rampant. And so many who will be watching this tape have gone through the divorce. But many of you can probably agree with the statement that there were unintended consequences that I couldn't have even seen, not only on myself, but also on my kids. And so sin definitely has impact. And when we're studying this, what we're agreeing with, what we're coming into unity with God on this, is that sin has impact, and now I need help. And by the way, I'm sick of the effects that sin has had in my own life, and I'm looking for freedom from that. Now, the unique thing about the Bible is, and misunderstood by many people who would call themselves Christians, is that when you come to Christianity, you don't just go under laws anymore. It's not the nation of Israel coming under the laws of which they couldn't keep. The way that we keep the law now, and the intent of the law, is to come under the guidance of the Holy Spirit, which I'm sure we'll talk about in studies to come.
Sure.
But as we come under the Spirit, we're now released from the the law, the requirements of the law. So not only are we not punished anymore, but now we're also guided into what is the intent of the law. Law just can't give us it gives us a sense of sin, but it can't give us a sense of total restraint and knowing where to go. We need, if you will, kind of an internal global positioning system to tell us, in 100 yards turn to the left, in 500 yards turn to the right. And that's what you see as the beauty as you begin to get closer and closer to Jesus. You don't need the law to tell you what to do and what not to do. You now just rely on your relationship with Him, the new seed that's been birthed on the inside of you, and you find yourself desiring, and this is the key, desiring to do the right thing, as opposed to desiring to do the wrong thing and forcing yourself into constraint. You now find yourself paradoxically desiring to do the right thing, and then you're released. And so the nature of man then changes and comes into alignment with actually the nature of God.
Well, friends, as you move through this third lesson, the continuing result of sin, one of the things that you'll come face to face with is a reminder of some of the consequences that happen when we sin. And I think sometimes, certainly in, say, television, we see over and over people making choices that are probably not good choices, and somehow the odds are always in their favor because they never encounter the consequences.
Yeah, that's right. That's what a 30-minute sitcom never allows you to, forces you to eat the consequences.
That's exactly it. And so sometimes, as hard as it may be, we have to go back through and say, these are the things that we do truly encounter in our lives when we make particular choices repetitively.
Right.
Yeah.